All right, hello and welcome everyone. This is Zotero for Research Management. My name is Matt Hunter and I'm the Digital Scholarship Librarian for Florida State University Libraries. For those who have not installed Zotero already, it's a pretty quick installation process. If you want to go ahead and do that right now, for the end of this presentation, you might be able to have it all set up and we can get you ready to go by the end of the evening. Or if you want to go ahead and start playing around with it and get into some questions and answers at the end. You can find all of these instructions as well at guides.lib.fsu.edu/Zotero. Installations and instructions are also at that website/install. So a little bit of guide there. The installation is actually pretty simple too. So if you go to zotero.org, click the big red download button and just follow the steps there. It'll walk you through everything. What you'll want to do is you'll want to download the desktop application, the browser connector if you are in Chrome, Firefox, Safari. I think that's it, maybe Opera too. And then you'll also want to create a Zotero account, which will allow you to sync your Zotero library from your desktop to the browser connector and to the online cloud backup. So you want to make sure you do all three of those things. That way you're working in the full ecosystem that Zotero has crafted. But why would you want to use Zotero? Well, it allows you to be really organized and clean up your research process so that it's a little bit more functional and you don't have to spend as much time sort of fiddling around with bibliographic entries and trying to stay organized. Zotero markets itself, as it says sort of here on the screen, as your personal research assistant, not just a citation manager. So it's a free, easy, open source software that allows you to collect a bunch of research from a bunch of different online places and connect to a bunch of different databases that have bibliographic information so that you don't have to kind of craft it all yourself. Organize your research in a way that makes sense, that has sort of full text bibliographic entry and any sort of notes and annotations that you're taking on that source yourself. You can then cite that research using a lot of the word processing plugins that Zotero has, and you can also share your research in a bunch of different ways that Zotero makes pretty easy to use in terms of like shared group libraries and personal profiles and things like that. So this is what Zotero looks like for anyone that hasn't played around with it before. What we're looking at here is sort of three panels. This center panel, it's about, it's not necessarily thirds, but the center panel is where all of the bibliographic items live. And Zotero calls those items because they can be any sort of research material. It just thinks of them as sort of things that have bibliographic information about them, which is displayed over on the right-hand panel as metadata. So that's the stuff that you think of in terms of the title of the article or the title of the book, the author or the creator of that thing, any pages, when it was published, where it was published, etc. You also have things on the left, which are sort of for organizational things, and we'll get into that a little bit later today. But you have these things called collections, which are basically folders, but it's where you put all of the bibliographic items to impose some form of organizational structure on that. You also have groups where you can share that library if you are doing some collaborative work. And you also have tags down at the bottom left where you can sort of say what a source is or what it's about or what it does well or things like that. And you can search all of that up in this search feature in the top right, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But this is basically what Zotero looks like. This is the basics. So you have your items, which is all of the things you're doing research with or on, and you can have that live in some form of organizational structure. And we'll talk about some tips on how to make that organized and work in Zotero well. So Zotero was built to answer the question, how does research happen and how is a good way for research happen? So as you're listening to this presentation and as you're working with Zotero, sort of be thinking about how do you do research? You know, these questions on the screen are sort of a guided meditation on that. And you should think about how are you doing research in terms of finding your sources, saving them, um, organizing them locally and sort of making sure that you have access to them afterwards. So, you know, are they backed up or something like that? And then that end research process where you kind of create that new bit of scholarship and you cite previous scholars, how are you writing that? and how long does that take? So Zotero is meant to make those questions be the answer to those questions that sort of unifies all that and makes it a little bit easier. So what Zotero is great at is finding sources online with web interface somehow, and then saving the bibliographic information. And what I mean by that is if you use the university library's website, what you're going to get is you're going to get access to a bunch of different databases that have bibliographic information, full text resources, and a lot of other materials that you use to do your scholarship. On those pages, there is a bit of code that says what all of that bibliographic information is, and Zotero can pull that directly from your browser. But it's not just on the university libraries, and it's not just library databases. There's that bibliographic information on things like JSTOR or on Google Books, but you can also find that information on WordPress, Twitter, Amazon, YouTube, anything like that, because it's not just books and journal articles that are used for scholarly research. So Zotero just scrapes a web page to sort of see who created this thing. When was it created? Where is it living and where is it published? So Zotero allows you to connect to the internet, find resources in ways that are common to us now, sort of in the 21st century, and then make sure that we have a good, reliable way to cite those sources in a way that's organized. And so what Zotero does is it takes all those sources and it collates them into a certain place on your computer that's a little bit more unified, right? So what Zotero is really good at is finding a single place on your computer and then making that a like I just said, unified place to have the bibliographic information and any files that are associated with that. But since you've already signed up for a Zotero account, there's a way to have that saved as a cloud backup. And so you can jump from one computer to a different computer to any other number of different computers, as long as you download Zotero and sign in. So you can have a Zotero account and pop back and forth between a bunch of different computers. This is really nice for those instances that you either work on a couple of different computers between a lab computer and your personal computer or a work computer, or it's also really nice in case of disaster strikes and you spill coffee on your laptop or something like that and it's fried and you need to get a new one. You can just download Zotero again, sign in, and then all of your resources with all of your notes and things like that can be restored from the Zotero cloud backup. And that means that your stuff isn't just floating around on your computer. So this example to the right, this is a screenshot of a folder on my computer, and it has a bunch of stuff in it. And some of them are articles, some of them are not articles, but I don't really know what they are because I didn't organize them very, very well. So what Zotero does is it takes these files and it can understand what the bibliographic information about them is. So if I'm looking at a journal article in here, so this one sort of third row down all the way on the left, 2015 A01 Lendon Julius Caesar, that is an article about Julius Caesar published in 2015 by someone named Lendon. And what that article is just a PDF for right now. But in Zotero, there's going to be an author name, a publication, the full title of the work, number of pages, and all that kind of stuff that you need to create a bibliographic citation, as well as that PDF. And when I go through and sort of read that PDF, I can create a note about all of the things that I'm reading and citing and thinking about in terms of like good quotes or making an annotation and just sort of doing scholarship, right? Reading it and understanding it and knowing more about it. Zotero can combine all of that in a way that means that I have a good way of finding that again and keeping all those files together. So if you have all of these files just sitting on your computer and you pull them into Zotero, there will be a way to organize them more succinctly. And if you save your sources from an online source, that PDF will be saved with that bibliographic information from the beginning so that you don't have to download it, rename the file in some format, and then still have a different file, like a Word document, that has all of your notes on it living in a separate file. So it kind of corrals all of that together. So once you have all of your sources, you've done all your readings and you've taken all of your notes, and you go to write your paper or your scholarly output of some sort, what Zotero can do is take those sources and generate a bibliography as you are writing your paper. It comes with plugins for Microsoft Word, OpenOffice, LibreOffice, and can now also work with Google Docs and I believe the Microsoft 365 Word cloud version. I believe there's a way to work with that as well. Um, and all you need to do is sort of hit a couple of buttons, look for the source that you're using in that one particular instance for your footnote or your in-text citation or something like that. Zotero will insert it in the correct format to whatever citation style you're using for that document. And once you finish, you can click a button and it'll generate an entire bibliography for you. So it's really nice to sort of have all of that generated so that you don't have to spend untold hours trying to formulate a bibliography when you've already done the hard work of coming up with your scholarship. But you don't need to sit there and fiddle with semicolons or italics or versus underlines and things like that. And what's nice about Zotero is that it comes preloaded with the major bibliographic citation styles such as APA, MLA, Chicago, and things like that. But you can also download from a community generated and a community sourced list up to I think it's almost 10,000 now. It's over 9,000 for sure, but I think it's about 10,000 additional styles. And those styles are things like unique journal citation styles. So if you want to cite in the Lancet or Cell or something like that, there are particular journal citation um, formats that need to be used for those publications. And Zotero can help formulate all of your citations in that style without you needing to sort of be an expert in that one particular journal. And you can just download those new citation styles, cite in that while you're writing your paper, and then generate your bibliography in the correct way. You can also switch back and forth between citation styles if that's not what you want to do, or you sort of choose the wrong one, and it automatically recrafts all of your citations. It also is an active process in Zotero. So if you are editing your document, you sort of move a bunch of pieces around. You don't have to go back in and sort of renumber footnotes if that's something that you use if that's a citation style you use. Zotero will automatically do that, and it'll automatically do stuff like IBID and the et als and things like that that you need per your chosen citation style. So that's a lot of sort of stuff of words on a page. But what I wanted to start doing now is showing you how Zotero works. This is a highly my version, I guess, of a network diagram. So what we're looking at is this piece in the middle, bottom left middle, is Zotero. Think of this as your local computer. That's a laptop with the Zotero program downloaded and installed. What you do is you go onto the internet and you find a source that you want to save. You click the little Zotero button, and that saves to your local computer. When you write your scholarship and your papers and things like that, Zotero will push that citation to your local um, like word processing software to create those citations. But if you're connected to the internet and you have a Zotero account, you're also saving all of the stuff that you've saved to Zotero to a cloud database backup. What's nice about this is that it also means that you don't have to have Zotero installed on your local computer to get access to all of that. You can just log in from the web to get to all of your materials. So if you just go to zotero.org and sign in to your account, you can see all of the things that you've saved to your Zotero library because they've been backed up and they live in a cloud in a way that you can gain access to and interact with. So that's really nice. It means that you don't have to worry about sort of having installation privileges on every computer you get to just to be able to see all of your Zotero stuff. I tell the story. I went to a conference one time and didn't have my computer with me, and I really needed to get to a particular source that I was looking at. So I went to the hotel's business center and was able to log in to my Zotero account and see all of the things that I needed without worrying about trying to download and install programs on super old 2004 era computer that was sitting in a business center. So that's always a really nice feature that I want to make sure people are aware of. Okay, so getting back to the Zotero interface for just a second, what I mentioned before about having this base level item organization, all of this lives in a library, and your library is where all of the stuff in your Zotero um, world lives. That can be organized into collections, and these collections are basically folders. And you can have sort of top level folders and subfolders under subfolders and things like that. But don't think about these collections as folders the way computers normally work with folders. They're more like playlists. So if you have an item in one collection and you want it to go into a different collection as well, so I'm a medieval historian that studies food. So if I am looking about, you know, diet and consumption in gentry and noble households, I can have that in my food reading list. But say I'm also working on a separate non-medieval food history, food studies, food history. So I can have that source in both of these folders without duplicating the storage, having notes split between one version of the document or another version of the document. So it can live in both places. And if I decide that I want to delete it from one of those collections, it doesn't mean that I've lost anything because it's just no longer associated under that collection. So it's like a playlist. The groups work in the same way. It's basically just having another library that you can share with other people. So my library is personal to myself. No one else can get to that. But I'm in several other group libraries where we can share resources. This is stuff that's really useful for like journal reading clubs or my office in the library has a shared library that we sort of share readings that we think are instrumental to the way we work and the way we think. So that's a really nice way of sort of interacting with other scholars. The tags can be used in terms of both content and topic. So the topic of a work can be ascribed a tag. And normally for things like books, there's going to be keywords and Library of Congress classifications. A lot of time, journal articles are also going to have keywords ascribed to them, and that just sort of gives you the main gist of what you're talking about in that article. But you can also add your own tags based on things that are more useful to you. So you can have tags based on, great data set in this one article that you want to make sure that you go back and use, or like, um, you know, this one also talks about this other topic that you wouldn't be able to see based on just the title. So you can sort of tag it in what is being talked about in that work or that item. You can also use it to organize, and this is something that I do. Sometimes I'll find a great reference in bibliography or a footnote or something like that and think, oh man, that'd be a really great source. I need to find that. So I'll add it to my Zotero library and then add a tag that says to read or find. And so that just tells me that if I look for those tags, I can say, okay, I haven't read this one yet, but it was really useful and it was cited a lot by a different work that I was reading. So I need to go find that. Um, so that's really useful. The search feature is also a little bit more complex than it might seem. You can search within obviously your Zotero library for things like strings of characters in titles or author names and stuff like that. But also since Zotero allows you to save PDFs, it can save full text PDFs and it indexes those so that you can search within those PDFs if you want to try and find strings like quotes. So if you remember, there was this really great quote that you want to cite. You can search in Zotero, and if you have the full text PDF and it's indexed, you can find which publication that quote was in, which is a really nice way of doing that. All right. So that's how Zotero works once it's sort of been populated. But how do you populate it? Well, if you go through the FSU Libraries catalog and you've downloaded the browser connector, it's going to be this little button to the top, near the top of your browser. So this is Firefox. And in Firefox, the Zotero button lives to the right of the address bar. In Safari, it's to the left. In Chrome, I think it's also to the right. But if you're not on a page that Zotero can recognize any metadata, it's going to look like a big red Z, like the Zotero logo. Once you land on a page that Zotero can recognize, it will change to whatever type of source Zotero has recognized. So here I'm looking at a journal article, And Zotero recognizes that and displays this sort of page with a dog-eared corner. And that's Zotero's icon for a document, like a journal article type document. So if I click that button and I have Zotero open in the background, this little pop-up in my browser will appear and says that Zotero will be saving this item right here into this folder of your organizational structure, and it will show what all it is saving in terms of attachments. So we'll get to this in just a second, talking about attachments versus items a little bit more. But basically what is happening is Zotero is reading this page and it's seeing all of this information here. So like the author, the source, the publisher information, publication year, etc. And it's reading that as bibliographic information. So once I've clicked that button, Zotero will save all of that. Since I've logged into the FSU libraries um, you know world. Since a lot of us are remote now, whenever you look for something in that advanced search or the catalog search, you'll be asked to log into your FSU account. Once you've done that and you click the Zotero button, it will also try to save, if you have access to it, any form of full text or full resource that you have access to. So here, it's showing that it's able to download the PDF from that EBSCO database because we have access to it through FSU libraries. Also works when you go to an outside database that we have access to through FSU as well. So if I look at something in JSTOR and I've signed into my FSU account, I can do the same thing. So here we're looking at same exact thing. Zotero recognizes that this is a journal article and it's going to be saving from all of this metadata right here. So it's creating the bibliographic entry, but it's unable to save the full text PDF because for some reason JSTOR would not let me save this. So since it looks like we have access to it right here, it may just be that I hadn't agreed to JSTOR's terms of service just yet. So if I were to click OK on those and try this again, it would probably work. So that's something to keep in mind. But that's how Zotero saves stuff from the web. It's if you get access to it and if you can look at it in the browser, if you would normally read it in the browser, Zotero can save that content directly to Zotero so you can come back to it later. You can also do a similar thing for lists of resources. So if you go through and you make this nice crafted search string in the libraries catalog, and then you try to save all of those search results to Zotero, you can do that as well. So here we notice that it's not just the document, it's actually a folder. So it's thinking that there are multiple items on this page that it can recognize, and it's going to try and save all of them. So you'll click that button instead of having that little small pop-up that says, yes, I'm saving this item to this collection and I'm saving the attachment, you'll get this list of options. So you can say, yes, I want all of these sources or entries or just a handful of them. And that's a good way to sort of start literature reviews or sort of landscape surveys and things like that. So it's really nice that you can save multiple sources. Just be aware that a lot of times in circumstances like this, there isn't a good way of saving the PDF as well because there's some restrictions on downloading too many PDFs too quickly. So if you do this, you'll most likely get all of the bibliographic information, but not the PDFs. Sometimes you will get PDFs or whatever sources you can get, but not always. So keep that in mind. Okay, so that's how you use Zotero in the browser. It's pretty simple. You just find a source and click the little button and it saves it to Zotero. If that doesn't work, there's a couple different options. And if your source doesn't live on a website in that same way, there are a couple different options. So we're going to go through now finding items and also manual entry. Something that I won't show in this presentation, but I want to highlight that you can still do is if you have PDFs locally saved on your browser, I'm sorry, not on your browser, on your desktop, you can drag those PDFs into Zotero or just sort of add them through a file browser or something like that. And that will create most often a bibliographic entry for those PDFs. So if you've downloaded a PDF some other way, you can just drag and drop those into Zotero and it'll create an item, which is really nice. If your PDF has been OCR'd or optical character recognized, and there's a way that Zotero can read that file, it will also try and find the bibliographic information there while as you drag it in. And that process has gotten a lot better in just the past couple of years that I've been doing this. Okay, so if you are looking for a different source and you say have a stack of books on your desk and you want to add those to Zotero without having to go through the library catalog or trying to find them, you can also use this magic wand um, entry tool. And the way this will work is you basically just type in the identifier number for that resource and it'll add it to Zotero. So for books, you have this great identifying number standard called the ISBN, the International Standard Book Number. And that's normally located in a couple different places. One on the copyright page, which is this page looking image, or it's also normally used as the UPC or the barcode number. So if you type in that number, you can get this book into Zotero really quickly. It also works for other items. So if you've been online looking at journal articles, and you've ever seen this construction called a DOI or a digital object identifier, it looks like a URL for a web page, but it's actually and it's normally a string of string of numbers and characters that starts with doi.org / and then normally a number that's a 10 point something number. You can also type in those DOIs and Zotero will add them the same way. So that's a really nice feature if you have resources that you've already found, but you don't want to go through and find them again. So that's a quick way of adding those to Zotero. Okay, so in using Zotero, I already talked about this add by identifier magic wand lookup, but there are other ways of dealing with the stuff in your Zotero, right? So we had this lookup tool, but if that doesn't work, you can also manually add items, and it just creates a blank bibliographic entry where you just sort of go through this form and fill out the author, the title, the publication, the year, etc. So that's another way of doing it if you have stuff that can't be found. Otherwise, you can still always add things manually just by typing in the information. And those are the two main ways of adding sources through Zotero, not just through like the web browser. But you can also deal with other files in different ways. So if you have a bibliographic source, I've been talking about notes for a while, but what these notes are, they live in two different sort of tiers. You can have parent notes that are standalone notes that sort of exist on the same level as a Zotero item. And that's normally for like notes to yourself or sort of contextual information for the collection that you're talking about. But I think the more useful is these child notes. And these serve as attachments the same way that a PDF would, but they exist similar to how you would basically write notes on a source and then append it to that source. So if you take notes in a PDF or something like that through the note or comment feature, it's the same idea, and they sort of all live together. So that's a really nice way of using that. And I have a different highlight here that I can show you in a minute. But you can also add different files if you want to your bibliographic items in Zotero. So if you have like a Word document that you want to attach as your notes instead, you can also do that and just sort of attach it as an attachment to that bibliographic item. If you have a bibliographic item and you want to do like a photo or a scan yourself and then attach it later through your computer that way, that's another way of doing that. You can also link out to sources on the web. So if you have like a YouTube video that you want to cite and it didn't cite correctly because the browser connector didn't work, you can click this little paperclip button and then just type in a URL, and Zotero will link out to that. The advanced search, similar to the search that we were talking about before, but it gives you a little bit more options in terms of, yes, do look in full text. No, don't look in full text. Only look for author names, etc. So basically an advanced search. You also have these tools over here for adding a new collection and adding a new group library or a feed. Those you'll most likely use less than the actual items over here for adding the items. But if you're just starting out and you're getting your organizational structure set up, that's where you do that. If you click that add new group library or feed button, you'll most likely have to integrate that through the web portal. So you'll like go in and add collaborators and things like that through online rather than through the desktop version. But if you have any problems with that, shoot me an email and I'd be happy to walk you through that. We're not going to get into that today. Other things to look at, just some other like Zotero interface things that I wanted to highlight. The tags that I was talking about before, there's a couple different ways of dealing with those. First, on the right, where you would normally see the bibliographic information, here I'm showing the content of one of the notes that I've done, and we'll talk about that in this next slide. But tags are added here. There's sort of like these panes that you can get to for the bibliographic source. So this info is the bibliographic info, that actual citation content. The notes are the ones that are going to be the child notes for that item. Tags are however you want to add keywords to be able to find it, which are then manipulated down here in this bottom left panel. And so what this bottom left panel is just a list of all of the tags that are in this collection. So not just this item, but everything in this collection. And as you click on these tags, it'll filter out everything that is not the tag that you just clicked on. So it filters down to just the tags that you're selecting. And you can also type it in that little bar, the box down at the bottom to sort of filter that way. This related tab, is a way to sort of relate multiple works together through two-way relations. And a lot of times, the best way I can think of to describe this is basically if you have a work, a book, and then you have a book review of that book, that is a relationship that may be important to talk about. And so Zotero has a way to sort of create that two-way link between the book and the book review. So that's just another tab that you can do. And just finally, there's this little circular green arrow, which is just the sync indicator. As that spins, your local Zotero is backing up to the cloud. If it hasn't done that in a while, you can click that button to manually force a sync, and it works really well that way. So that's basically the whole user interface. There's a bunch of other stuff that you can get into, but that's what you need to know to really get started. The tags, I'm sorry, not the tags, the notes. Just because I mentioned that I would talk about this, basically what this looks like is a rich text editor. So if you add a child note to this item, you get this space where you can sort of take notes on the work, or you can use it for whatever you want. It's just a rich text editor, but it gives you some options in terms of like text formatting and things like that. So it's pretty robust. You can edit it in a separate window if that's more useful, because this is a pretty small window. Especially if you don't have an external monitor or something like that you're plugged into to kind of give yourself some more landscape real estate. But you can use this notes panel to take notes within Zotero so that you don't have to open another program. Zotero does not have a built-in PDF viewer though, so whatever you are using to view PDFs is what Zotero will open if you click on that. Okay, so now that you've saved all of your sources, organized all your sources, and taken all of your notes on your sources, and you've started writing your scholarship, you'll need to cite with Zotero. And in Microsoft Word, it's very easy. Same thing in LibreOffice and OpenOffice. Google Docs is slightly different, but I'll show you that here in a second. But basically what happens is when you download and install Zotero, it will, well, big asterisk here, it should automatically install the Microsoft Word connector. Most of the time that it doesn't do that is because Word has already been open. So if you have a bunch of Word documents open, save them, close them, install Zotero, and then reopen Word, and it should be there. But basically, the first time you cite a source, you'll use this add edit citation button that appears on the window, the Zotero tab on the ribbon in Microsoft Word, and that will pop up an option asking you what citation style this document is in, what format is it in. So if you click whatever format you're using, APA or Chicago or whatever, it will keep that preference saved for the entirety of the document. So you'll not have to choose it every single time. But once that happens, this Zotero search bar will pop up. You'll type in something to help you find that source. So the author name, a keyword of the title, a tag, a date, anything. Then you'll select that work. it'll add that citation in here in this search bar so that you can edit it if you want to, or add additional. Editing is sort of when you want to add page numbers and things like that, or add sort of like a prefatory comment um, for anyone that uses sort of footnotes and things like that. That's a quick way of creating footnote content. But once that's done, you'll hit enter. It'll insert that citation into your document, and then you're done. As you do that more and more, you'll finish up your document. And then once it's completely done, move your cursor all the way down to the bottom of the document and click this Add Edit Bibliography. And anything that you have cited in your document will be pulled into a bibliographic, a bibliography or a work cited at the bottom of your document. So it normally takes like a couple of seconds to craft all of that once you've already cited all your sources. So it's really quick and you don't have to sit there and type it out by hand. So really, really nice to be able to just generate that really quickly. There's a couple different options here in terms of like refresh in case you've added or deleted a bunch of stuff and it hasn't reflected that in your bibliography. And then document preferences is where you would change between citation styles if that was something you wanted to do. I was a classicist, so depending on what class I was in my program, it would potentially be an archaeology class in which we would sometimes use either Chicago or APA, or it could be a literature class, a ancient literature class where we'd be using MLA. So I had several times started writing a paper and used the wrong citation style. Zotero would have made that a lot easier to just switch back and forth between styles, but I didn't use it back then, which was a problem. Google Docs, pretty much the same thing. It's just that you don't have to worry about installing anything other than Zotero itself. So if you have Zotero installed and you're working in Google Docs, there should be a Zotero option in the toolbar. You'll then just use it the same way as I just mentioned in Word, add a citation, ask you what citation style you're going to use. It'll apply it to the whole document. Go through, add your citations through that little Zotero search bar as I showed you, add your bibliography at the end, you're done. It won't work unless you have Zotero open locally though, so kind of keep that in mind that you'll need to not only have your browser open and working in Google Docs, but you also have to have Zotero open locally. What's nice about citing with Zotero is it automatically generates a lot of the format stuff. So again, like I was saying, if you cite multiple times in a row the same author and your citation style uses IBID, the IBIDNM, as previously cited, Zotero will automatically do that, and it'll do it in the correct way where the first time it shows up, it will always be the author's name, and then every time after that will be IBID. If you cut and paste like a giant chunk of your document and sort of screw up that order, Zotero will recognize that and move it so that that first time the author is cited in the document as if you were reading it, that's the first time that full citation will appear or something like that. So really nice. It'll reorder footnotes. Like I said, if you cut and move big portions of the text, or if you sort of delete content or delete footnotes, it'll reorder them automatically so that you don't have to worry about doing that manually. The bibliography is automatically generated from anything you cite. So if there's not a way for you to accidentally miss something that you cited on page 10 and then didn't talk about again. That always gets picked up by Zotero and added to the bibliography, which is nice. Like I was saying at the beginning, most of the common citation styles are included out of the box. I would say 99% of people who are writing for classes will be covered by the citation styles that are there already. If you want additional ones, there are over 9,000, sorry, not almost 9,000, over 9,000 citation styles available from the community, and it's easy to switch between them. If you don't need to use the full Zotero features and you just wanted to know, in this workshop about how to use a quick bibliographic generation tool, you can go to zbib.org, and it's the Zotero interface, but just to quickly create a bibliography. Okay, final words and then some tips, and then we'll move into the Q&A. So just to keep in mind, Zotero is a local program, and your storage is dependent on how much room you have locally on your computer. So if you have multiple terabytes of free space on your hard drive, Zotero has multiple terabytes worth of storage that it can utilize. But if you sign up for a Zotero account and you're saving and backing things up to the cloud through that cloud sync, you only get 300 megabytes of free storage. There are paid options for larger storage amounts. The first one, which is the lowest, is 2 gigs. So you jump from 300 megabytes to 2 gigs, and it's $20 per year. You can jump up to 6 gigs for $60 a year, or unlimited for $120 a year. So you're basically looking at $10 a month for unlimited cloud Zotero storage, but that's just for Zotero. So if you already use something like OneDrive or the Apple version, I'm blanking on the iCloud. If you already have that, there's a way to set up Zotero so that it can utilize those. And if you want to do that, just shoot me an email. I'd be happy to work through that with you. If you create groups, and if you're someone who's creating a bunch of reading groups and you're the group owner, be aware that group storage is your storage. So if you have a group that's saving a lot of full text, full color, high resolution PDFs, your storage is being used for those. So your 300 megabytes, if you're using the free account, is going to be eaten up pretty quickly by that. Also, keep in mind, Zotero works on Windows, Mac, and Linux systems. It does not currently work as so Zotero as the desktop program. Zotero does not work on Chromebooks, and if you have a tablet or other device like that, there isn't a great first-party app for those. They say it's coming soon. They've been saying it's coming soon for about a year and a half, but with the pandemic, I'm sure they were also delayed a little bit. Third-party support is not super great. There's an app called Papership that allows you to use Zotero libraries. It went unupdated for about 3 years. I think it was just updated a little bit recently. So it's sort of spotty in that regard. So if you have like an iPad or something like that, you can use the online, just zotero.org, to interact with stuff, but maybe not as an app. And, I've spent 45 minutes now talking about Zotero. I really like it. It's useful for my work. But if you start working in it and then you find out that there's a different citation manager that you want to use instead, you can export all of your stuff out of Zotero and move it into a different one. So don't feel obligated to continue to use Zotero. You're not stuck and you don't have to go back through and do all of that work again. So I'd say give it a shot. I really like it. It changed a lot about how I work, and I like the way I work now better than I did before. So, there's a user testimonial for you. Couple real quick tips just to sort of things that I've learned over the course of the many years that I've used this. But if you're using Zotero, try and always get as close to the source as possible. So if you're like finding a WordPress site that has a link to JSTOR that has to be logged into through the library's account or something like that, try not to cite directly from that WordPress. Try and get as close as possible. So get to that library catalog version, or get to the version in JSTOR or something like that. And if you have an identifier number like a DOI or an ISBN, use that or click on that to try and go to that source, because that way you prevent a lot of the errors that Zotero has in finding the bibliographic data from the website, and that should help that way. In order to help remedy that, though, I also say if you click on the Zotero button in your browser to save something, always try and double check right away that it saved correctly and that it got all of the information that you need while you have the source open in that other window or something like that. Because I've definitely had it happen to me that I save something and I think I got it, and I close Zotero and I go off to do something else for the day. Then I come back a couple weeks or months later, and all I have is just a untitled, no date, no author website that's title is just website, and the link is broken. So I don't know what I was even trying to cite at that point or trying to save, so I can't get it back, and that's always disappointing. If you have an optical character recognition system, run that on the PDFs that you have before you upload them to Zotero, because it allows Zotero to sort of index them, like I was saying, so you can search through that. And it allows you to find, it allows Zotero to find the bibliographic data because it can also read that PDF. Optical character recognition programs exist in things like Adobe Acrobat, and if you are an employee or I believe, grad student at FSU, you have access to Adobe through FSU ITS. If you are just an undergraduate student, you have the opportunity to purchase it at a cheaper price, I believe. So that's one way of getting to that. Um, Other things to keep in mind, save your documents if you're doing any sort of annotation or highlighting on them, because Zotero saves all of the changes on that document, and then that copy will be saved to the cloud backup so that you can propagate those changes across all of the places you're seeing it, and sync your library often, right? So if you don't see that little green circle turning a bunch, click it every now and then just to make sure that all of the changes that you're doing in your Zotero library get saved. And stay organized. If you just dump all of your stuff in your Zotero library at the top level, it's going to be more difficult to find things and utilize things at the end. So just try and organize in whatever way that makes sense for you. All right, so we're going to move on to the question portion now, and I'm going to stop the recording.